building anything important is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to stare that in the face. And you have to understand that, I don't know, if Zuckerberg stands up and tells a story about, infinite strings of success or whatever he's got, I do not think that is a lived experience for most people. It certainly is not for me.
They're outliers, right?
This joker is hard. And anything worth doing is hard.
Tell me about yourself.
So look, kind of high points here. So my parents are Oklahomans. I actually grew up in Alaska. My dad moved up to Alaska to work on the pipeline. So I grew up in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is an oil and gas manufacturing town. And yeah, so I had that childhood. Ended up going to West Point for undergrad.
From Alaska?
Yeah, well, actually from Southern California. So we had moved. I went to high school in Southern California. Went to undergrad at West Point, and I was a senior at West Point when the towers went down, right? So I was kind of the generation of folks that went into West Point for, I'm not going to say just for free college, challenge yourself and so on, but I didn't actually know that we were going to graduate into, the Afghanistan and Iraq wars.
Right.
But yeah, so that was when I grew up.
What year did you go? 99?
No, I was 02, right?
02,
So
02.
I was high school 97, did a year of college before I went to West Point, then was college 02.
Okay.
So we graduated in 02, and then I was an infantry officer, so I did all the training stuff. And then Germany was my first assignment, and
Nice.
I was part of the group that we were actually supposed to invade. If you remember this, we were going to invade Iraq from the north as well, but Turkey didn't let us through, so we were the group that went around and were kind of the second crew in.
Okay.
So I did a year in kind of the OIF-2, like of that first phase of the war, with the 1st Infantry Division, and then I had the opportunity to go serve at the 75th Ranger Regiment, and I did 3 more tours in Iraq with 375.
Wow. That must have been intense. Very, very intense. That's not a hanger, kick back type and relax organization.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was a wonderful opportunity to serve. Right. And I branched infantry because I connect with people. You know what I mean? There are a lot of branches and they're all great, but there are a lot of very technical branches in the military. Always thought the light infantry was about like working with people.
Yeah.
And look, as you know, like Iraq and Afghanistan, this is a lieutenant's and a captain's war. This is not a colonel and a general's war. And so a lot of this is having the chance to go operate independently and go, build teams and solve hard problems in a difficult operating environment, which
language barrier,
all of this.
Different culture of understanding,
and candidly, you grow up fast when you're doing that at 23, 24, 25. But no, so these were my formative experiences. I'm very connected with the Army. I mean, I love West Point. West Point was great. A lot of guys are very connected with West Point. I'm very connected to the Army. Still talk to a lot of the soldiers and squad leaders and NCOs and guys that I worked with in the Army. And
that's amazing.
We are all a product of our experiences, for better and for worse. And so,
Did you have why West Point? Was your family in the military, aunts, uncles, anything?
No, I mean, candidly, the free college was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I also had, they have a program where they'll send a cadet to go visit their high school, and you can get out of class to go meet with some guy. So I had done that to go, you're going to go meet with somebody, and I was like, I really want to not be in class, so I'm going to go do that. And I remember really just being stricken that that young man had a sense of what he was doing, where he was going, and he was going to go achieve something hard, and that was interesting to me, right? So
he
the
knew
chance
already
to go,
at that age what he wanted to,
and so I think he was maybe a sophomore at West Point or something like that, and I saw that and was like, look, I want to go do something hard. I want to go do that instead of going to dork off in college at Georgetown or at wherever. I want to go see what I'm made of. And, that whole part, I grew up in the be all you can be generation. I think you probably did as well.
Same.
And And again, I have a lot of respect.
Which is now back, I think, right?
It is back.
It's back.
Yeah. I went to go be an army of one running around by yourself in the desert
right.
or whatever those ads were. And now it's back. But I have a lot of respect for the young men and women that entered the service after and even now, knowing that they're going to deploy.
Big time.
You know, and I didn't, like, that was not a foregone conclusion. You know what I mean? The war kind of broke out when I was in the middle of that. And
yeah, I'm a 2000 guy. So you're right. When I went there, it was my folks, my dad actually served. So it was more of like a family business, if you will.
Yeah.
But then when you're there, you graduate, you're like, no, it's become real.
yeah.
Now we're about to take all the things in the book, and it's your time. It's your show to be able to do it. Did you grow up with brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I'm the oldest of three. I have two younger brothers.
Two younger brothers. Did they serve?
So the middle one did not. The younger one also went to West Point and was an infantry officer as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So what brought you here to Texas?
You know, so my journey, so I was a 02 year group officer. At 07, we had, this sounds ridiculous in hindsight, but it almost felt like we had won the war, right? So this was about the time period, like I spent 05, 06 chasing Zarqawi around Western Iraq, if you remember that. We got him. We essentially, that stabilized in large part the whole Anbar awakening in the Anbar province. And this was the point then where the U.S. started to declare mission successful, started to draw forces down significantly. This was before Afghanistan had really ramped up. So when I looked at this, I said, look, I think my generation's war is over. And, you know, I had done, as I mentioned, 4 rotations. I had commanded 3 different platoons. I think I was probably one of the most senior platoon leaders in the Army, or I had been in the seat for about 40 months at that point, doing an infantry platoon, then a scout platoon, then a ranger platoon. And you know, I kind of felt like, okay, like I'm not as interested to go do the 10 years of peacetime or 15
Were you married
years
at the
staff
time?
guy.
Or
I was not. No, I was single. I was dating my now wife. But so, yeah, I decided to get out. And, you know, obviously our generation's war wasn't over. And, you know, my friends and colleagues that stayed in or, you know, did rotation 15, 16, 17. And I have a ton of respect for those guys and gals that went through and did that. But yeah, so I got out. I went into consulting. One of my clients ended up getting poached to go be the CEO of a tech startup in Austin, and he convinced me to quit my job and come move the family to Austin, which we did.
Where were you coming from?
We were in Southern California.
Oh, Southern California.
Yeah, so I had married a woman from Orange County, and we were living in Orange County, California.
Nice.
And yeah, my wife we had our daughter, and she was 30 weeks pregnant with our second kid. So one of the most selfish things I think I've ever done in my life was to say, hey, we got a great job offer. Let's go to Texas. But she did, bless her heart. And we built roots here and have recruited most of our extended family here now. Like I'm a Texan. We're not going anywhere. We've been here almost 15 years now. Too? Yeah. So her mother's here. My parents are here. One of my 2 brothers is here. I mean, and so we've grown roots here. It's been great for us.
What year was that? That was
2012.
2012.
Yeah.
Wow. And so you've seen Austin kind of evolve and to see the spark and fire really in where Austin is going.
Yeah, I mean, it candidly, it felt like it was already going gangbusters even in 2012. And everybody's like, oh, you got in too late to buy a house, you know, and all of this stuff. And so it already felt like it had gone through a big surge, but it's probably at least doubled since then. It's been really fun to see it grow.
And you landed in the east side or west side of Austin?
Yeah, so when we first moved here, we didn't know the city, so we just rented a house close to the office. We're kind of by the Domain up there, up in North Austin. And then after exploring the city and, you know, finding a church and doing those kinds of things, we decided to grow roots out in West Austin. We're out by Lake Travis High School.
Lake Travis High School. Yeah, it's the same. So we're neighbors in that way.
Very good.
Yeah, we did the same thing. We come in, settle, figure out where the landscape was, where the good schools. You can't go wrong. I mean, there's places obviously that are better than others, but we arrived in the Lake Travis area. That's very cool. So how did you start? What was the company that was, you said a tech company. It was a startup here in Austin.
Yeah, it's called Tracking Point.
Tracking Point.
Yeah.
Oh, Tracking Point.
Yeah. I joined post Series C.
Post Series C.
Yeah.
They were along 130.
That's right.
Yeah, 130 had a big, huge warehouse.
Yep.
I remember that company. I don't know if it was when I heard about it, but I had heard all of the great things. It was this system, and I think one of the Navy SEALs' wives had shot this thing, and she became like sniper qualified, or it was just to that degree.
It was a neat business.
Really, really neat. And so you left that business, and when did you start Sustainment?
Yeah, so we started this company. We were working on this in 2019. We actually incorporated the business in early 2020. So really the thesis of this is we're all about manufacturing. And, this is not a controversial statement to say manufacturing is very important. So, manufacturing is approximately 13 million men and women work in that segment, maybe 10% of the workforce. And it's about 2.3 trillion in contribution to GDP, which again is like 8 or 9%, I think, of the total GDP in the country. So big industry. And when everybody thinks about manufacturing, they think about Boeing and GM and, the big
boys.
Mm-hmm. But that's really not the heart and soul of American manufacturing. So when you really look at the industry, there are about 250,000 manufacturing businesses. Just under 99% of those, like 98.5%, are small businesses using the 500 employee NAICS code standard. And of the 13 million men and women that work in manufacturing, about 70% work in the small business segment. So really, when you look at manufacturing, it's not these big giant companies. It's tens and tens of thousands of great businesses spread throughout middle America. Like, that's just what it is. And as a result of that, it is a very, very fragmented industry. And we've run into this for decades, of this idea of like, how do you find suppliers who are going to go build, these contract manufacturers that are going to go build parts for whatever you're doing.
Right.
And one of the things in this hardware company that we had done previously is there were areas where it was easier to go buy components on Alibaba or one of these like marketplaces that you can go find a Chinese manufacturer than it was to go find a Central Texas business. Because candidly, in a lot of these aren't great websites. These are people that are working. They're not like on LinkedIn marketing themselves all the time.
Absolutely.
So you're almost like going to like Chamber of Commerce meetings and collecting business cards and saying, hey, who knows a guy that does castings and or whatever that you need to get done. And so the fundamental observation is that that's a problem for the country, and there has to be a better way. There just has to be a better way to find and get work done with U.S. manufacturers. So that's the problem space that we set out to tackle.
A central node, if you will, or a repository where you could activate that repository.
Yeah,
it's not just phone numbers where you have to go and tap into a chamber of commerce. You really have operationalized the network.
Yeah, I mean, it's grown significantly. We've actually grown. We had kind of initially launched this as a network business and have grown very, very deeply into like workflow software to be the connective tissue in between how these manufacturers operate. I mean, real quick. So the story of the business is my co-founder and I had taken this up to the DOD, right? So this is early 2019, 2020, like kind of at the beginning of the Air Force having redone the SBIR program.
As an idea or a concept, or
we had a company and we had the idea flushed out a little bit, but we're still pretty early.
Okay.
But we were able to get picked up and get some initial traction with the Air Force Sustainment Center, candidly, which is the organization in the Air Force that does all of the, it's just, sustainment is a technical term in the military. It's like the act of keeping things operational,
right.
Having the parts that you need
Making
to
sure
repair.
the operational readiness levels.
Absolutely.
Right.
So this is like, the Air Force Sustainment Center has this huge problem where they manage these depots and they're buying repair parts from industry tens and tens of thousands of times per year. And they're saying, look, like we know there are other manufacturers that can build these parts for us. We know there are oil and gas companies that have the same machines, equipment, et cetera. We just don't know how to find them. They're not applying because they probably can't sort through all the nonsense you have to do to be a government contractor. So we really got initial traction around this supplier discovery. Who else is out there? Because the DOD had narrowed their supply chain so hard that they were like one deep in all of these critical
That's
categories.
a single point of failure.
Absolutely.
Multiple single points of failure, right?
So we started from that. And in order to do that, we needed to go figure out who are all the manufacturers. And then we needed to build software and AI. We were actually very early in this AI race to connect parts technical data, technical drawings for parts with manufacturing suppliers, right? This is kind of the heart of the company, is this network of manufacturers who are constantly updating their information with technology to say, hey, who else can build this part? And maybe I just actually have the technical drawing, or maybe I just want to describe the technical, what it is in natural language to you. And I want you to, you're not going to do it for me. Like, we Sustainment don't sell parts to anybody, but we're trying to give you a short list so that you can not spend time in Google. You can have like, what are the 3, what are the 5? So this is kind of the call it the 2020, 21, 22 phase of the business. And then as we got into this, we started talking to commercial manufacturers who are trying to onshore. And this has been a thing. And I'm convinced that this onshoring is a secular trend that will define the next 30 or 40 years of the U.S. economy.
Is it going well? Real quick, a status check.
Yes, but it's hard.
Right.
It's hard.
Absolutely.
And it's capital intensive.
Absolutely.
And it's not a switch that you flip.
Absolutely.
And it is, we can get into like tariffs and industrial policy and all of this kind of stuff if you want. I talk to a lot of people and have some perspectives on that, but it is a uniquely bipartisan issue here, right? Like the Democrats and the Republicans approach that problem differently. The Democrat, like the Biden administration, being very focused on industrial policy and some of the things associated with that. The Trump administration being more focused on tariffs and those sorts of policy or
different
monetary instruments.
To kind of
They're
achieve
different levers to achieve the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
So what we found, though, is that these companies who are looking to onshore, they don't just need to like find suppliers, but they need a system of action to actually get all their work done. Right. And so we've really built out into that. So if you look at Sustainment today, and what we sell today to commercial companies is we sell a system that allows you to have all of your suppliers in one place. If you have gaps or want to augment your supply chain, it makes it very easy. We make it very easy to identify and onboard new suppliers. But we really spend a lot of time helping the quoting process, like making it very easy to competitively quote business, to manage projects. Like once you have, these larger companies will have 300 to 500 POs or sometimes even more out at any given time. And candidly, it's like herding cats to be like, hey, are you guys on time? Are you on time? So we do that. And we do all of the analytics of that. So you have your whole supply chain in one place, right? And that's the majority of what we do for commercial companies. Our defense business is still primarily focused on finding suppliers and who else is out there and alternative sources of supply to basically reduce risk of single point of failure stuff. But that's essentially the company as it stands today.
Did you, you mentioned the sustainment command of the Air Force and through the probably small business approach. Was that a concerted effort, or you needed capital? Because it sounds like you recognize commercial is probably a bigger market. So I'm curious as to how did you approach the department? Yeah,
well, you know how being a startup guy and being around startups, you know how this goes. Like you have a plan, but capital matters and customer interest matters. And so there is a sense of like, let's find the soft spot and let's go build out where people have pain and want to pay us. And so, again, if we would have stepped back and had $25 million out the gate to go build this, we might have hit commercial a little earlier, but we hit a very defense first, Like I think Sustainment there are a lot of dual use businesses that say they're dual use because it's easier to raise capital when you say you're dual use, but we almost have to be because we have to have a way for suppliers to give us data about who they are, what machines they have, what they do. I mean, almost think of it as like their Airbnb profile of like, this is what I do.
That's how I look at it.
People to find me. So we have to have this commercial business. But then the DoD, like we're pretty optimistic that a lot of the challenges that the DoD is finally waking up to against like this global geopolitical manufacturing war that we're in the middle of with specifically with China, the DoD is really starting to act, the DOW now is really starting to act around that. And so we had a lot of early success with the Department of Defense, now Department of War. We've then built out our supplier side, then we built out kind of our commercial side, and now we're spending a lot of time in D.C. as the U.S. looks at how would we mobilize the economy if something were to happen and so on. And we'll kind of see how that arm of our business goes. But it's a big topic right now.
Let me ask you just on that dual use approach. Did you have that in mind? I mean, because, when you start getting, I've seen some companies, they get the SBIR 1, they get the SBIR 2, and they look at the Department of War as, oh my gosh, that's it. I don't need to look elsewhere. Maybe when we're $1 billion company that will expand in that way. So what drove you to refocus?
A couple of things. It's a really good question. And one of the things that drove that, I'm trying to piece back the sequence of events here, because there's one thing if we were actually talking to manufacturers through our supplier side business who were like, hey man, like I actually kind of have these problems as well, and I would love for you to help us solve these.
The community you were with.
So the community that we were with was kind of telling us that it would be great and that they would probably buy something if we built something for them for basically the supply chain management side. And then we also, we brought on venture capital in early 2020. Like we did a seed financing in 2020. And so we had professional investors in the business pretty early on in the journey. And it's actually really helpful to understand that perspective of like how companies are valued and how they're structured and different kinds of, like how different types of revenue get valued. And there's obviously a lot of value to government revenue and defense revenue. But when you can have a more balanced customer portfolio and have more repeatability and scalability in your commercial side where you've got some big opportunities on your defense business, like that's just it's a safer and a more valuable business to grow. So, all of these things were kind of bouncing around, which led us to push into the commercial segment when we did. It is hard though. I mean, it is worth saying that when you're building a dual use business, specifically from the go-to-market perspective, is you are building two companies or two teams, and you kind of pretend like they're not, but like go-to-market and say like those are not the same human beings, processes, and so on that you need to be successful.
Nomenclature, vernacular, right? And there's not a single decision maker in that way.
Absolutely.
It's this network of decision makers.
So this is the risk of this whole dual use thing. And that's why it's a very reasonable perspective to say, hey, I'm going to wait, and do this later, or I'm going to hit a certain level of scale before we do this. But we kind of felt like we had to in order to build, again, like having supply chain teams and their suppliers work together on sustainment actually feeds the machine, right? Because we're all about data, not just the data of who you are and what you can do, but I actually like if I can see what you bid on, like that helps us drive work that you're probably going to want to bid on in the future to you, for example, right? And if we can see what you perform successfully on, like all of these things help basically give us a very unique and comprehensive picture of like the whole manufacturing economy. And so it all feeds the flywheel.
So what is Sustainment, the company? Is it a data company? Like, I'm interested to hear how you coin it.
Yeah.
Is it an intelligence company?
Is it a network company? Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like we're a software and AI company focused on making it easier to find and get work done with manufacturing suppliers. I actually think the data layer that sits underneath it is the way that we are effective on this. As workflow tools become more and more, not commoditized, but as the bar to build them goes down in the world of agentic AI and cloud code and so on, the idea of having a fundamental data layer that provides insights of best fit and so on, I think is the heart and soul of the business.
And to your point, I mean, look at IBM. I was kind of come back to the, preventative. We've spent time in the motor pools. Oh no, you were a light guy, so I don't know if you.
No, I was a Bradley PL in Germany.
Oh, that's right. You did say that, right? But you look at preventative maintenance, but then I see this IBM Watson commercial where the guy comes up before it was broken. Right. I think that's part of the data layer, the opportunities that you see by having that. And it sounds like you've captured that on so many levels. So where do you go from here?
Well, I mean, we want to so the vision of this business, and if you really step back, so most manufacturing is distributed. And by that, I mean, let's say you're an OEM, original equipment manufacturer. Let's say you build a pump or something like that. Let's say your pump has 200 parts in it. you're going to build some percentage of those parts in your facility, and then you're going to trust a network of suppliers to build some other percentage of that. And usually they're going to come to your facility, you're going to run assembly, and you're going to sell these to your customers. That's like how almost all manufacturing goes. And if you're very vertically integrated, maybe you're making 70 or 80% of the parts in-house. I've seen some medical device companies that are totally vertically integrated, but it's super, super rare. And it's very common now to see companies that are only doing assembly. They're relying on suppliers for all of the parts, and they're doing assembly, which, they viewed as this is the core value add that we want to do. But so this is how like manufacturing gets done. Manufacturing is a team sport that requires a lot of complex coordination. And these suppliers are people you deeply trust and rely on as essential parts of your business. So if you step back and say, hey, that's probably how manufacturing gets done at scale, hundreds of thousands of times in the U.S. economy, what we really want to build is this coordination layer across that individual companies can use to manage that coordination across their supply chain. And it usually starts with who are my current suppliers and making it easier to facilitate that. And then it goes to like, hey, I'd love to have some alternatives, or maybe I'd love to bring this part onshore that's offshore. And it's a process because as we mentioned previously, onshoring, like just changing a supplier is expensive and retooling and there's risks and, all of this involved. So if we do this,
and you're putting your name behind that.
100%.
Like it's 100%. Like an all in.
100%.
You don't know,
100%.
Right? So.
Yeah. And so you have this, and you're running this basically coordination layer across these individual supply chains. But when you go put all of these alongside each other, you get a really, really interesting picture of what the whole country is doing. And this is what we would like to be for the federal government, not just even the Department of Defense, the whole federal government. Because essentially, if we look at this manufacturing issue in the United States, and if you look at how there is all this talk about China and 2027, and we can have a separate discussion around whether it's a good idea to put timelines and all that kind of stuff together. But if that were to happen, if there were to be conflict with China that lasts more than 2 or 3 weeks, like replenishment of stockpiles is a significant factor, potentially the determining factor of like who is successful or not successful in that conflict. And if you go look at the lessons of the late 1930s, early 1940s, I think most interestingly documented in a book called Freedom's Forge, which we give to everybody who joins the business.
Love that book.
If you look at that, though, really this idea was like, who are the commercial manufacturers out there that can build the parts that we need? And in the 30s and 40s, they were doing this analog through relationships, kind of through the Detroit hub of aviation and automobile manufacturing. But essentially what we've built is a way to do that at scale using software, right? Of saying, hey, what's the most intelligent way to route these parts through this network of people based on their capabilities, their interests, their proclivities to succeed, their proclivities to bid, maybe even their availability if we can get folks to tell us about that. And this idea of being a coordination layer across the whole country, I'm fascinated by. And I don't think we have to fill that role to be successful with our commercial business. But I am, as a veteran and a patriot and kind of a mission-driven guy, I want to build a business that helps people and helps the country. And this is something that we've spent a lot of time looking at and talking to folks about in government, and would love to contribute to this.
Bret, I have to tell you, I don't want to make this about me, but what you just said, I trace line to 2 big conversations that really, in my career, your platform was needed years ago. Well, first was when I was at the Naval Postgrad School, we had, I forget his name and his title. He was actually teaching there, or he was a guest lecturer, talk about when we were thinking about going into, the global war on terrorism fight. And he was sitting there with the senior, national security staff. And he said, he was the finance guy. He said, if we're about to go into war, we have to look at the books and understand what we're going to be doing. And really, can we sustain ourselves? Not can we just kind of go in, but if we're rolling in, we're going to be there a while, we need to know the capacity of where we're at. And that comes down to micro understanding to a macro decision. And I think that's what your platform can absolutely do, is change and understand these things. And then later in my career, I was in the Pentagon. And I won't name the senior officer, but I will tell you, he had a bunch of corporate level CEOs and stated that, you know what, I'm having a difficult time really being able to see and understand where I can dial the level up and dial it down and almost do course of action analysis before I make a decision. Meaning, okay, if I dial this knob back, what impact is this going to have from a sustainment tail? Can that manufacturer produce these items? I think ammunition is probably one of the biggest things that we could trace line. It was important, like hellfires. How many are we producing, right? And when is that going to lay out? So I'm mad at myself that I didn't really sit down with you earlier, that this is a bigger problem that you can address, not at the, the global scale, national scale. And where would Texas, even in Texas, can you talk about what's going on here in the state? Because they have a theme that they want to chat, manufacturing, we do it here.
Yeah. No, it's a great call out. And to close on this defense strategy piece and then transition to Texas, Ukraine and Israel have demonstrated that this stockpile strategy is not sufficient, right? Like, we essentially had been operating under this idea that we are going to forward deploy stockpiles of munitions and war materiel. Any war that we got into is going to look like Gulf War I, and it's going to be over in 2 weeks, and we're not going to have to go and replenish the stockpile. So we shot through all of those stockpiles, and it's nuts to see how, like, what the lead time, specifically in munitions, but what we've shot through in 6 weeks was going to take 4 years, 5 years to replenish. It is really has shown a light on the failure of that approach. And this isn't, I'm not throwing any stones. Like, this is obvious for all the planners and all the folks that are thinking about this. So there is a problem. And then if you think about it, like, how do we address that problem? How do we get more manufacturing? Well, you have option A would be to go build a bunch of factories. Mm-hmm. And that sounds expensive. And the government should do some of that. But option one is, like, build a bunch of factories. Option two is, I don't know, maybe nationalize everybody's factories if something happens. And option three is to intelligently distribute manufacturing into other manufacturers that you aren't working with right now. And, if something goes down, I think all three of those are probably going to be in play. But the most reasonable investment right now is, I think, to plan ahead for how you're going to use the existing industrial base that's outside the fence, so to speak, of, like, traditional defense manufacturers. Mm-hmm. And this is where we get to Texas, right? So Texas is the number 2 manufacturing state in the United States as far as count of manufacturers and manufacturing employees and productivity and so on. California is 1, Texas is 2, and then it's a huge gap before you get to 3, 4, 5, 6.
Really?
Texas is growing the fastest. California is attriting, is probably is not surprising as far as businesses leaving the state and so on. So, I mean, Texas is essentially the center of gravity of U.S. manufacturing, or is becoming that.
And you have the data to support that.
We have the data to support that, but it is also like it's the industries that you would expect. We have high tech, we have a lot of electronics manufacturing, we have a lot of oil and gas and those related metal fabrication businesses. We have a lot of aviation. It's the industries that you would expect. And we, one of the ways that we run at this is the challenge for our business. And if you kind of recall my story of getting a demand anchor on the DoD, which then led us to be like, we got to get the suppliers. We spent a lot of time marketing the suppliers and sending emails and kind of got nowhere. But then what we did is we piloted a partner program with some of these state groups, starting in Texas, where we said, hey, there are groups in Texas, in every state actually, but again, we started in Texas, that are funded by, like, there's a group called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership that's funded by the Department of Commerce. They're branded differently in each state. Mm-hmm. Texas is called TMAC. There are also groups that the DOW funds in every state. There are also great Austin Regional Manufacturing Association. Sure. There are great associations and
the ARMA, right?
ARMA. And so what we did is we said, hey, we'd love to partner with you guys. So we have infrastructure to like help you understand who all your manufacturers are and communicate with them and organize with them and report out to the state and provide the services that you provide to them. We can give you this shell, but it's only going to be useful to you if you work with us to help all the manufacturers join this.
Right.
So we piloted this idea of like the Texas Manufacturing Network, right? And so if you've ever heard of that, that's actually our software. We have multiple partners who are helping get the word out about that. It's totally free for suppliers to join as part of our commitment as a public benefit corporation. And this program that we piloted in Texas really worked great. We have similar programs in 24 other states.
Wow.
And have about 100 partners that are these manufacturing support organizations who tend to be boots on the ground for suppliers. They get a lot of benefit for, they'll go walk the floor. They'll actually do a lot of data validation to be, to make sure that somebody's not saying they can do X when in reality they can only do Y. Right. And so we're trying to approach this as like a big tent. Let's like rise all the boats together here. Obviously, we as a business benefit from having more supplier data because that makes us more attractive to the companies that pay us, the commercial and defense companies that manage their supply chains through sustainment. But it's also a public good here, and It helps the states like understand and support. And there are a lot of great programs at all of the states, Texas specifically, to help manufacturers grow and so on. So that's essentially our flywheel, is these state partners and local partners help recruit suppliers. Suppliers join for free. Suppliers they do work with larger organizations that are buying parts from them. That makes the states happy because there's economic development being driven into their states as opposed to offshore or wherever, which makes them excited to go tell more suppliers about this and so on. So this is essentially the flywheel that we've built with this business.
You should be proud of that, man. I mean, how long have you been? Since 2012, I think you said?
We've been slogging at this thing for a long time. This company is 2020. We founded this in
2020. I'm sorry, right? So, since 2020. And are you raising capital? Like, what's next? Are you like scaling globally in this space?
Yeah, I mean, so we are continuing to raise capital, and we're not in the middle of a financing right now, but we are continuing to raise capital. We are in the venture train for better and for worse. Which is good. We've got some great partners there. We are, I don't plan to expand internationally. Well, let me say that differently. Like if we were to go, so you fast forward 10 years and we've solved the problems that we want to solve in the US, or we want to go concurrently build out globally, I have zero interest in building a global network of manufacturers that can all compete with each other. Zero interest. I will never do that. Let me say that differently. Yeah. Having said that, I really do believe that the world is changing, that we're kind of through peak globalization, and really what you're seeing is these kind of regional manufacturing areas. Right. Like if you talk to South American companies, they're trying to localize manufacturing operations in South America. European companies are trying to localize manufacturing operations in Europe. And there will still be some extent of global supply chains. But I think the default will be not just who's cheapest, but a more thoughtful blend of trust and risk and all of that in addition to just cost, which is kind of what we have been running at. So if Sustainment were ever to broaden out internationally, I would see us doing this in regional pockets, right? To make it, again, easy for European manufacturers to localize and work with their suppliers, right. Easy for South America, as opposed to trying to have a global marketplace. One of the commitments that we've made to American manufacturers is that we will never do that. We will never do that. We will not, if you go join our software, give us your data, participate in our community, our commitment to manufacturing suppliers is that we are not going to build another tool that makes it easy for people to shop you against China. That's been done to huge damage to the industry, and we are not and will not do that. And that's this whole... You and I were chatting a little bit before we started about public benefit corporation and what the heck that is. That's actually a legal mechanism that I put in the governance of our company to ensure that our board is not just running after purely the fiduciary interest of shareholders, but they are also accountable to the mission The mission being like that we are supporting U.S. manufacturing. And if we run this business correctly, those things never fall out of sync. But I actually think it's an important commitment of, people ask all the time of why should I trust you? And, you say like, first off.
You have a trusting face, man. I don't know why they even ask you that.
Yeah. You say, hey, look, like, this is what I'm about. But then also, like, this is how I've organized the company to make sure that that we run this thing with integrity.
How big is your company?
In terms of people?
Just people?
Yeah, we're about, call it 35 employees, 40, 45 total people.
35 people. And you have a platform of your own, and you've got an ecosystem that you've been able to manage. So how could somebody work with you or partner with you in that way? Or if you kind of put these guys into buckets, so I'm a small business, I have a small shop, like where do I start?
Yeah, so if you're a supplier, so we're sustainment.com. We'd love for you to go. If you look at the top right corner, there's a login button. If you've never logged in before, you can create an account and build out your profile. We'd love for you to do that. If you're a larger organization, think anywhere from a couple of hundred employees to a couple of thousand employees. We'd love to sell you software. So if you work in sourcing or procurement or supply chain, those are kind of the people that we work most directly with. Or love to at least show you what we've got and how we've built kind of software and AI to help manage your life. But those are the main ways to work through. And then, as you know, if there's anybody listening to this that's on like defense or Department of War or federal government side, those are all combos, and happy to share kind of where we're embedded and what organizations we're working with. If there are other opportunities to expand, we'd be really interested in that. The department, have they come to you and really lay out a program of record approach and what you're doing, enterprise level software purchase? I'm curious as to where you are at with the department. Yeah, it's selling into the DoD is complicated, as you well know. And so what you should think about us as having a tactical tool for the federal acquisition workforce that we sell on like a license basis into these people that are buying parts, that are doing this. And it's all about operational efficiencies that make you faster and hit the key problems. The key problems are not enough competition, which means you pay too much and you wait too long, right? So we're trying to hit these, 550-day lead time across the depots is unsatisfactory. We're trying to cut those lead times out, which ties into operational readiness ratings and all of those things. So we have a tactical tool that we sell. And we sell that, again, a lot of software contracts aren't huge programs of record like that. We're, work through the GSA schedule and so on. And then this idea of like, how do we support the national mission? That's a little bit more complicated. And there are, the department and the federal government writ large is actually working through who owns that mission. Because it's not obvious that it's just a DOD or a DOW mission.
It's not.
It actually, like, if you trace all of the authorities from World War II, they actually sit in FEMA now under DHS.
Homeland.
Yeah, no, but again, there's a whole discussion around should it be there, should it be at the department, and so on. And so that ultimately would be a program, of some sort. We'd be honored to be part of it. I don't think we would have the whole program. We'd love to be part of it.
Right.
And it is, again, how we lean into this is a mixture of how the department works with some of these great new manufacturing businesses that are being built, some of these automated factories. And, there's a lot of cool stuff happening in manufacturing tech. So it's an issue of like getting new suppliers in and figuring out how to be more efficient with existing suppliers, and then how to like leverage this whole base of the rest of the country. And that's our lane. Like, we want to be in that lane.
Are you excited about where the country is when we talk about reshoring and the industrial, being a focus area for us? I'm curious as to your thoughts and the direction that we're heading. Not to air you out or call you out.
I mean, like real talk or look, real talk is I think we're in a position where we need to fix a 30-year mistake in like 5 years. And I'm not sure that's even possible. And I'm also not sure we have the political will to go do that. I mean, essentially, if you look at this, so if you agree with the thesis that sustained or protracted combat will run through, like manufacturing and replenishment of material will be important. If you agree with that, then you actually look at the relative size of not just industrial capacity with the US and China, but industrial capacity specific to the things, to munitions, to drones, to motors, to, to things that we will need to
deliver capability.
Deliver capability in kind of the future generation war. And China has done such a good job of dominating these industries, not just like slightly outcompeting the United States, but dominating these industries. Like if you look at drone manufacturing, for example, it's absolutely nuts. And it's thoughtful and deliberate and effective what they've done. They've essentially said, we care about small drones, small first-person drones. Therefore, we are going to put state capital into our manufacturers. They are going to be able to undercut the whole rest of the world on price. So then everybody is going to buy DJI drones. Mm-hmm. So we are going to get all of the economies of scale so that even if we stop putting state capital into these businesses, they're going to have such scaled operations that they're going to be almost impossible to compete with on a direct basis. They've done this for drones, for pharmaceuticals, for electric. I mean, there are a lot of these categories that are very important that they've done. And if you're an American business competing with the Chinese government, like the fact that you threw in the towel 5 years ago or 10 years ago is like, I get that. I get that because again, we had even like the police force across the United States buying Chinese equipment. Like how are you going to be effective there? And so this is the state of play. Yeah, and there is a lot of work to be done to go rebuild. And I am optimistic that we're actually doing things about it now. I do think there are some programs that are more effective than others, but this is just not a switch you flip. I mean, this is everything from capital allocators being excited about the sector to young men and women being excited to go work in this industry again, to entrepreneurs wanting to go build businesses there, to like figuring out some mechanisms to actually make sure we buy stuff from these businesses, even if they can't compete on price immediately, because we want to protect these industries all the way through. And it's just a lot, man.
You know, when I left the Army, everybody was talking about, and you've probably been familiar with like TRLs. What's the TRL level? Yeah. And I think it's probably because what they've captured in the narratives, right, and what we're looking for. But manufacturing readiness levels are actually, when you get to the program office, those are the conversations that you're having. But when I was in the building, it is industrial readiness. That's what we need to be talking and focusing on, is what is our industrial readiness level. Now, I took my boss, we went down to Hawaii, right? Visited the 25th. And we heard from one of the commanders there that says, sir, machetes, we have to buy it. We're mandated to buy U.S. We can't. There's nobody really making it. And if we were, it'd be at a price point that's so ridiculous, we let that atrophy. That was when I really was shocked. I was like, oh, whoa. You mean the machete market is no longer a U.S. market that's reasonable? It's like, oh, wow, that was just one isolated event. Now compound that to where we're at today. So I agree with you. I think you're starting to see small movements, but it's not one singular decision. It's going to take a community effort, and it has to be incentivized. And what is that incentive structure?
Amen.
It's difficult. And so like the Freedom Forge book, I think is where you saw us come collectively together as a nation. Yeah. It can be done, but we need to focus on that now deliberately, or a small part, whatever it is. Everybody's got to play their part. And I think that Texas is one of the better states that's focused on that. I forget the gentleman's name. But when I met him, I think it was at an ARMA event. He was the guy that came up with "Don't Mess with Texas." Now he's leading this industrial movement where they're talking about high school students, right? There's other options available to you in that way. I forget what it is, but I'm excited about a program like that. But even more so about your platform.
Yeah, man, and like manufacturing is a great industry. Like these are great jobs. I mean, and people have this character in their head of like, I don't know, the manufacturing guy or the manufacturing girl it's wrong. Like
It
if
is
you go
wrong.
into these shops, they're amazing. They're amazing. And, they're highly automated. You go talk to these people, they're super proud. They got robot arm, they're usually working in a little cell, like where you have one individual operating 3 or 4 CNC machines, computer numeric controlled manufacturing machines, maybe with a robot arm or something like that, that's placing parts that come out of the machine. And it is a very dynamic, high skill, highly technical job that pays freaking well as well. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
I think like this whole past generation is coming out of this idea that you got to go be a banker or a consultant or whatever, to go be successful in this day and age. And I am so excited to bury that, because this, again, like we are a nation of manufacturers that is essential to our identity, to our history. And, again, manufacturing strength is national strength, I think, in large part. And so, yeah, no, I love what the state is doing. And I agree with you. And again, like we talked to all the states, and I actually have a kind of interesting perspective of who's taking this seriously and who's approaching this in different ways. And Texas is doing a great job. I think the governor's office is doing a great job. A lot of these, ARMA is a really strong organization, as is Opportunity Austin, there's a good network of
These enablers. To keep that conversation
Absolutely.
going. Right.
And, and again, it is this idea of like just having coherence at the state level and taking that coherence up to the national level. Because at the national level, there's still a lot of like, the SBA focused on these things, the DOW focused on these things, Commerce focused, there are a lot of these, and a lot of they're similar and they overlap, but it's such a big problem set that I think there are opportunities to get a little bit better and more aligned and more actionable. But even if policy was perfect, which I don't think it'll ever be, and that's nobody's fault, but even if policy was perfect, this is still a generational effort that we're undertaking.
I couldn't agree more, right? Just put the wheel turning.
Yeah.
It is a generational mandate, if you will, that we have to leave this place better than before.
Absolutely.
And it's going to require these things and the commitment for that. Brent, this is amazing. I'm really excited to hear and learn more about sustainment. I wish we had this conversation earlier. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with, or a call to action, and how can they help even support you in your mission? Because that's really what my biggest takeaway was, is not that you're running a company, not that you have a great platform and success, but you're on a mission.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. So in the first, and I appreciate your perspective and your position in the local ecosystem here in Austin. And I would say towards that end, I mean, look, obviously, like we'd love to sell software and we'd love to grow the business and so on. Like, so that's step number one. But I know that you've got a lot of entrepreneurs in your network, and to talk a little bit about that, building anything important is hard. Mm-hmm. And you just have to stare that in the face, and you have to understand that I don't know, if Zuckerberg stands up and tells his story about, infinite strings of success or whatever he's got, I do not think that is a lived experience for most people. It certainly is not for me.
They're outliers, right?
This joker is hard, and anything worth doing is hard. And you need to be anchored. You need to find your sense of self and like, why are you after this? And what gets you up? And the idea of like wanting to be a successful entrepreneur so you can go be on podcasts or whatever and tell your story or whatever, it's a bad plan. It's a bad plan. It's not going to hold you up, man. Right. It's not going to hold you up. And
do you want to drop the mic now?
Oh yeah.
Congrats, man. You made it.
So the heart of this thing though is like, I guess I find that like I'm a mission guy, and I need a mission. Got out of the Army, joined Consult. I'm building PowerPoint decks for these guys that then are owned by these guys, that then are owned by these guys. And it's this big chain of kind of who cares. And that's when like leaving the military was really, really hard for me. And I find this idea that you need to attach yourself to a mission, or you need to create one. And that mission needs to not be about you. It needs to be about helping others. And, again, what we want to do in this business is we want to help others, like straight up. We want to help the men and women in manufacturing. And we want to do this in a way that is sacrificial to ourselves for their benefit. And I'm okay leaving gain on the table. I think that's the way that this thing works. If everybody does that in a little bit, we all grow together. but I want to help people and I want to help the country. Like that's what I'm about. And again, if we do that and we align incentives, we will create productive outcomes for our investors and our stakeholders and all of these folks that are tied to that. But at the end of the day, like if I'm just extracting value for myself from the economy, like I'm out. Not interesting at all. And I don't think that holds you up. I don't think that holds anybody up.
Yeah, nobody sleeps well at night. Yeah, I agree.
And so, so just the perspective on entrepreneurs, like expect this to be hard and find your mission.
Find your why.
Find your why. That's a great way of saying that. Find your why.
Find your why.
And then again, for folks in the third cohort, so, we'd love to sell software, talking to entrepreneurs about mission, and then talking to the Texas state government folks. I mean, first piece is just well done. Like, I really do think that the Texas does a great job at this. And if there are any folks that want to talk through how we're working with other orgs, it's not sales pitch. We're not doing this. This is not a revenue line for us or anything, but happy to talk to whoever about how those programs work and what we're doing to support Texas manufacturers for the benefit of Texas. And again, I really do think if you can kind of create something that supports the interests of all parties, like if you can align all the incentives there, like this is where greatness comes from. And Texas was such a big unlock for us, in the 22, 23 timeframe where we're like, let's just work with the state. And that's been such a cool model for us. So
that's neat.
Yeah.
Okay. Now to the question that I told you I was going to ask you.
Oh, I didn't think of a good answer for this.
That's okay. But I think you got some inspiration, but it's what, if you had to pick a call sign for yourself, what would that be?
Well, let me tell I have two call sign stories.
Okay.
So first off is, so when I was just a line infantry PL, we ran Tikrit. Like Tikrit was my city. We ran Tikrit, and there was a big road through Tikrit. And so we were the guys doing raids and doing all the fighting in the city. And you'd have the truck drivers, the supply guys come through. And again, that's a sucky job. And bless their hearts and so on. But it was always funny when you hear somebody come over the net. There's an inverse relationship between your job and how tough your call sign sounds. So whenever it was like Death Dealer 6 is coming up, we were like, oh, it's the truck driver.
That's
guys,
right.
Or whatever. The second piece is we deployed a lot with the Navy Special Operations community. And it's just so hard. Those guys always, and they're great. But, hey, I'm cue ball or whatever. And you're like, man, you're a grown man.
I'm not going to call you
hey,
cue ball. You don't want to save yourself the embarrassment.
And in the Ranger Regiment, we are famous for being the anal retentive, and so our call signs were, I was Mike Bravo 16, through which you could tell battalion, company, platoon, roll, that's it. That's all you got. There was no fancy, ain't nobody have any call signs or whatever. So I prefer not to pick some crazy call sign here. I'm going to stick with my boring Army stuff. I think that fits.
Mike
that
Bravo
fits who
16.
I want to be. That's what I was back in my last job.
I love it. And thank you very much, Bret.